They get knocked down, but they get up again. You're never going to keep them down. Let's talk about the new Necron rules and detachments. Hey everyone, welcome back to another review video. As always, my name is Jay, and in this video I want to talk about the new detachments and some of the special rules that are new for the new Necron Codex, which is now out for pre-order, and will be out in a couple weeks. Just like the previous two codices, so Tyranids and Space Marines, I don't think that the Necrons and AdMech are going to be complete meta changers. Let me start off with that. But both codices, much like the previous two codices, present several fun, awesome, and a few really competitive ways of playing Necrons and AdMech as well. You'll see in a future video when I talk about it. But I don't think this codex is going to be a complete meta breaker. There are some detachments that are more competitive than others, and there's some detachments that are less competitive than others. Some will be pretty aggressive in the meta, but I don't think this is going to break the system by any means. I just think it's a couple really good combinations. The new Necron Codex focuses a lot on leaders and synergy, which I really love. That it's a great field of the Necrons, and what you're going to find is that certain leaders are going to be taken pretty much in every army, for sure, and people are going to love them, right? So that's going to be really cool. The new Overlord is a really cool model with his cool Rubik's Cube of Doom, and certain HQs are just going to be really taken. So let's talk about that today. So, of course, we have to start off with Reanimation Protocols, which is the army-wide special rule for Necrons. It's been for many times. They get knocked down, they get up again, you're never going to keep them down. And similar to the Index, this one got tweaked slightly. So, of course, at the beginning of the command phase, you roll, D3 wounds are returned for each squad that's on the table, which is the big change. The squad has to be on the table, and of course has to be injured. You can return D3 lives back to it, and of course if you max out the wounds of all the models, you can bring one back with one wound and start healing that up as well. But the big change is that the squads have to be on the table at the time. They have to be on the battlefield, which will come into play. Now you're wondering, like, how will that come into play? That's going to come into play with one of the detachments for sure. And so that'll be the big trade-off, is if your squad is off the table at the time of the command phase, they're not going to be reanimating. And of course there's a couple of other buffs in there that you can get extra reanimations, like a res orb, and which allows you to do it in any phase whatsoever. But yeah, so that's the Reanimation Protocols in a nutshell. It's just as good as it was before. I don't mind the has to be on the battlefield part, because just the other one, it'd be pretty crazy if you're healing things off the table. Wouldn't make any sense, right? So it's predictable. It's just the same as before. This should work out okay for the Necrons. Overall, I think that this is just based on all the other changes. It's not a huge, limitation on this rule. I've preferred the rule in the past for the reanimations, but this is okay, right? So your opponent will have to blow a squad off the table to prevent them from reanimating, and that's it. So your opponent will always focus on eliminating squads versus whittling down squads, because you can bring them back. Makes sense. Also, of course, consistent with the Index, the Camtech Reanimators still provide a powerful, plus D3 additional wounds to a unit each time it reanimates, which is great. That will help bring them back to life. But now it only does at 3 inches, I believe, compared to I think it was at like a foot. And it was a 12-inch aura before. Now it's only 3 inches. So I definitely see Camtech Reanimators being taken very, they have to really hug the other squads. They may not be taken as much because of the limitation of distance. I think they're still going to be pretty survivable. I just think that the big change from 12 inches to 3 inches is huge, as you're going to say. So that'll make a huge difference in the reanimation for sure. So first, of course, we should start with the Index detachment. It is the command protocols, right? So the detachment rules command protocols of the Awakened Dynasty, which is the Index Detachment. We'll start there. It got tweaked slightly, but the main thing is it's nice and easy to remember. While it basically says, while Necron character model is leading a unit, the unit gets +1 to hit. Easy, you know. It's going to be, you know, pretty easy to remember, right? And again, the amount of leaders that you want leading your units, whether they be overlords or named characters or whatever, it's pretty easy to remember, pretty competitive. +1 to hit is huge. Once again, with like most armies, the challenge is to wound. So +1 hit is great. You're gonna hit with a lot of shots. Then the key is you have to try to wound your subjects, and hopefully the amount of hits leads to a wound. Right? That makes sense. But overall, this is pretty similar. There were slight tweaks with the enhancements and stuff, and a couple of the other, a couple minor tweaks that are different from, like in the previous codices, really nothing changed from the index to the codex. In this one, just some minor tweaks. I'd say overall it's about the same power level as it was before, just as competitive. But I think you'll want to take some of the other detachments more than this one because they're just more fun and interesting in my opinion. Now the second detachment is what most people believe is the weakest of all the detachments. It's the Annihilation Legion. And the Annihilation Legion is very specific to very specific models for bonuses, and the rules are very specific to situations, and so I don't think it's going to be used as much. It'll sure help the models that it affects, but it's just not one of those, like as I said, the previous index, if it's being led by a character, awesome, right? +1 hit, nice and easy. In this one, they have a detachment rule called Annihilation Protocol, which only affects destroyer cult units, which there's a bunch, right? And flayed ones. So basically, they can reroll their charges, which is great. And if they target enemy units that are below half strength, they get +1 to the charge, which, great. But two things. Number one, rerolling their charges alone increases the chance of getting in. Then it's below half strength. So you have to whittle a squad below half strength, and they have to be pretty much the closest thing to assault to get +1, and it's only on Destroyer Cult and Flayed One units. So again, it's a nice little boost, but I just don't see this compared to a lot of the other detachment rules being something that will be really useful in a lot of games. As I said, if you really want an assaulty army, cool, but what Necrons specializes shooting, and some of the best close combat units aren't the Flayed Ones or Destroyer Cults, and as I said, reroll to charge, awesome. The below half strength kind of hurts because it's very situational as I mentioned. Now one of the positives of this detachment is that there's an enhancement called the Soulless Reaper, which is pretty cool. Basically you can put it on a character like a Scorpic Lord, and you know, attach him to a squad, and if your opponent tries to leave combat, you roll a dice, and on a 3-up it prevents your opponent from being able to leave combat, which is pretty cool. I think that's a pretty awesome enhancement. But overall, as I said, this detachment was kind of the weakest of all the detachments I found. Up next, we have, I think, the coolest of all the detachments, the Canoptek Court. Right? It's a very cool detachment. It's a lot of fun. I think this is probably where the competitive meta will lie. This one or the next one I'm going to talk about is I think it's very competitive. The Canoptek Court is all about, as you mentioned the name, Canoptek units. Makes sense. And Cryptek units, which I love the Crypteks. I think Crypteks are going to be taken in swarms in these codices and leading a bunch of units because it's going to be very cool. So I think this is where the strength of the Codex will lie. I think this is where the nerfs are probably going to happen if the Codex gets nerfed. That being said, I still don't think this is a meta-breaking detachment. I think it's a really cool way of taking the Necrons. So, the special rule with this detachment is called Power Matrix. And once again, it is situational, but it's pretty awesome. Basically, your Power Matrix is defined as what land you essentially control, in a nutshell. And so, your detachment zone is always in your Power Matrix. And then if you control more than half the the objectives in No Man's Land, it becomes your Power Matrix too, and same with your opponent's deployment zone, right? And you want to control the Power Matrix. You want as big of a Power Matrix as possible for the next thing. Because basically, so all Canamtech and Cryptech units in your army reroll 1s to hit all the time, which is phenomenal, right? That's great. But if they're in the power matrix, it's rerolls to hit. Pretty awesome, right? That is a really, really cool rule because, you know, it applies to like Wraiths, it applies to Doomstalkers, it applies to Tomb Sentinels. They become extremely reliable. Plus, you can take it with Warriors or Immortals because they can, you can put a Cryptech with them, right? So your base troops will fire insanely. Take a giant blob of Warriors. That's amazing. They can really they can really try to get a bunch of critical hits. Reroll hits while in the power matrix is huge. That's why you can definitely see power in this detachment's rules, right? I think Cryptechs are going to be taken, as I said, they're going to lead a bunch of squads, and as many things you can fit a Cryptech with, or a Canamtech unit, you'll be taking and having a hilarious time rerolling 1s or rerolls, period. Once again, the Necrons are going to have problems wounding their opponents for certain shots, but you're going to get a bunch of hits. So hopefully the bunch of hits lead to a bunch of wounds. Makes sense. The next detachment is called Obelisk Falls, and I actually really like this one. I think this one's cool. It's kind of the elite, it's the elite one, like the Terminator feel from Space Marines for the Necrons. I think it's a really cool detachment. So while the previous one has been focused on Cryptechs and Canamtech units, this one focuses on Triarch units, Lich Guard units, and Overlord units. So once again, a bunch of generic units for the Overlords. I think they look awesome. I love the new kit. You want them in your squads anyway. Lich Guards are awesome. They hit hard. Triarch units, awesome too, right? I used to love them. Now, the one thing is, and a lot of people mention this already in their videos and reviews, is that a bunch of guys are missing the Overlord keyword, right? All the named characters don't have the Overlord keyword, versus, you know, most of them, like Captain Lysander for the Space Marines has Captain as a keyword. However, Trazyn the Infinite, Emotech, the Stormlord, the Catacomb Command Barge, none of them actually have the Overlord keyword at the moment. So until this gets FAQ'd or nerfed or changed or anything, unfortunately this will not apply to them. And that's really unfortunate, because to be able to take this with a Catacomb Command Barge would be really cool. And basically, the detachment rule is called Worthy Foes. Now, Worthy Foes is pretty cool. Basically, every command phase, you get to choose an enemy target, and any of your squads with those keywords, so Overlord, Triarch, or Lich Guard, get +1 to hit. Pretty straightforward, right? It's kind of like, in my opinion, it's better than the Space Marine rule. I like that, +1 to hit. This is a game where it's harder to wound. Sorry, +1 to wound. I do apologize. +1 to wound. I correct myself. +1 to wound against that squad, not +1 to hit. And I think that this is a great detachment for that rule, because again, Triarch, Lich Guard units already hit hard, but Triarch units can hit hard, and Overlord units can hit hard, and then whatever they're leading, that's pretty awesome, right? So the thing about this game is that it's so easy to hit your opponents for most of the armies. It's really hard to wound. So +1 to wound against you pick the scariest unit that you can basically target. Helps, right? Going from 5s to 4s or 4s to 3s is a huge upgrade. And so I think this will really increase the amount of Lich Guard you're going to see. And of course the new Overlords look awesome. And Triarch units, you know, like a Triarch Stalker would be really cool. It shoots really well too. This detachment I really like. Again, it's kind of this one versus the previous one, which is the most competitive. I love the +1 to wound, to be honest. But the rerolls, you know, reroll that hits while in your matrix is pretty cool too. Pretty cool. And the final detachment is called Hypercraft Legion. Their special rule is called Hyper Phasing. Makes sense. Very logical in these names. Basically, this makes your Necrons Grey Knights. I love it. I've played Grey Knights one time so far in this edition. It was really fun with their, like, pulling off the table. And, yeah. So, basically, it makes them Grey Knights. So, depending on the size of your army, you can either choose 2, 3, or 4, again, depending on the size of your army. Most battles would be 3. That are not with engagement range of your opponent. You can basically pull off the table, right, at the end of your opponent's turn. And put them back on in your movement phase, at the end of your movement phase. So that's the really cool thing. The flip side about this is they're not on the table. And that's what I wanted to bring up at the beginning of this video. By hyperphasing, again, you can drop them in reserve, you can bring them out of reserve, right? They basically put them on the table. This is extremely versatile, but you don't get to heal them. They're not subject to reanimation protocols because they're not at the table at the beginning of the command phase. They're off the table. However, this is pretty cool, right? It allows you to basically deep strike move your guys around the table. It's very versatile. You can get to objectives. It will help you score points. This is a great secondary detachment because if whatever you need to score, you can throw your guys in that direction, and it's up to 3 units per turn. So even at the end of the game, you could still do this, and it really will mess with your opponent because your opponent will know, essentially, you can never focus on a specific area because you just jump to the other side of the battlefield. Makes Necrons Grey Knights. They're the same color after all. Both metallic. Works for me. I like it. I like this one a lot. It's going to be fun. I think the other two are just more solid hitting, but this is a very general. Like this is, if you're a good strategist, this could be a very fun detachment to take because then you can always adjust to the secondaries, to the primaries, to whatever you need to do to get the points, right? And it's whoever gets the points ultimately wins the game, so it's pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed. And that's it. Those are the detachments for the new Necron Codex. Overall, I think the straight one in the index is cool, but I like the hyperphasing one. I like the one with the matrix, right? They're awesome. And I love the elite one because it makes Triarchs and Overlords just awesome, right? +1 to wound is pretty cool. The weakest one is definitely the reroll charge distance. For your flayed ones, just not as strong, right? And +1 to wound if they're below half strength. Very situational. But what do you think about the new Codex? I think it makes Necrons more exciting. It's like definitely more competitive because now you have options. But it makes the army more exciting to play, more fun to play. It gives you a variety to play. And that's what I've been loving about these new codices, is that it makes each army just more fun to play. I don't think it's a meta breaker. It just gives you a bunch of options and versatility and some flavor and themes, and it just, it gives you a bunch of options versus one specific data sheet, which becomes predictable and a bit dull because it tends to favor certain units. So now that more data sheets and more detachments are out, more models become viable, more squads become viable, more different play styles become viable, and that's what I love. So what do you think about the new Necron's Codex so far? I'll definitely make some more videos. Leave comments in the comment section down below what you think. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel if you already haven't done so, and hit that bell so that way every time I make a new video, you see it. Stay tuned for more videos and videos about this new Necron Codex. And thanks, and this is Jay saying, happy painting with your Necrons.